A new documentary showing around the country is painting a grim picture of the fish stocks remaining in the planet's oceans. Shot mainly in the northern hemisphere, the documentary features scientists who fear that by the middle of the century, the seas will be fished out. But what's the situation like for our south coast fisheries? 5 years ago, after years of overfishing, the federal government put in place a scheme to buy back fishing licences and introduce strict quotas. So, is the scheme working? Jeremy Thompson tested the waters at Ulladulla.
Early morning in a cold and rainy Ulladulla harbour, but the fishing has been good. It usually is.
How many kilos do you reckon you got?
1,200. 1,200.
Had a good catch?
On average, 3 ounces fish eye, so...
In the northern hemisphere, though, fishing is in far worse shape, and nowhere is worse than off Canada's Newfoundland coast.
The cod was so plentiful, the communities thrived on fishing. As the years went on, technology improved. The boats got bigger and catches increased. The bounty seemed endless. Then, in 1992, the unthinkable happened.
Let them in.
What had once been the most abundant cod population in the world had been fished out of existence.
Today, there are so few left that they've got endangered status in Canada, and the cod populations have not rebounded despite a moratorium on cod fishing since 1992.
Only 5 years ago, the Australian South Coast fishery looked to be heading the same way. Fish stocks were dwindling through overfishing, and the industry was not looking sustainable. So the federal government stepped in with a $220 million adjustment package. Quotas were introduced to reduce the catch, and fishing licences were bought out in a scheme welcomed by the fishing industry.
I think absolutely in the past there has been overfishing, and that's why we needed a big effort reduction, and Commonwealth Fisheries moved to managing, or to be managed under quotas.
Fishing the last 2 or 3 years has got a lot better. As soon as the introduction of the Commonwealth buyout, we've reduced fishing effort, and the availability of fish at the moment is quite good.
Tony Lavelle is a third-generation Ulladulla fisherman. Like most of the South Coast trawlermen, he's a supporter of the quota scheme and says it's working.
Just the east coast of where we fish at the moment, there was a reduction of 65% in effort, and it's really made it so much easier to catch fish. We have to search for them a little bit more because there's not as many boats on the water, but as soon as you do find those fish, the availability is really good.
How's fishing out there? You seem to have got a few.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
The just-released documentary The End of the Line has painted a grim picture of the Northern Hemisphere's fish stocks.
That if the current trends continue, the stocks of fish which we now eat will have collapsed by the middle of the century.
This is not some horror scenario, it's a real possibility, and it's not rocket science, because if we're depleting one species after another, it's a finite resource. There will be a point in the future where we will run out if we don't change the way we treat this global resource.
It's tough sometimes in Australia because we're tarred with the brush, of international fisheries, but if you live in Melbourne or Sydney and you eat fish that's caught on a trawler, from the southeast trawl fishery, you can pretty much be assured that it's highly sustainable.
Most of our fish that we catch are sustainable. We've got measures in place to keep them sustainable, and I feel our fishery is in pretty good shape.
It's not often that a government industry adjustment scheme has been so warmly welcomed by the industry it's regulating. But not so welcome are plans for a large marine protected area off the south coast that will exclude fishing altogether.
Look, if you look at Australia, as a whole, Australia is 0.002% of the world's seafood production, but has 38% of the world's marine protected areas and rising. So whether we need another one or not, I'm not sure, but we accept that the Australian public want a marine park, so we're trying really hard to engage with the Department of the Environment, make sure it goes in the right place, and that being a place where it has minimal impact on the fishing industry, but maximum impact in terms of protecting biodiversity.
But the fishermen themselves appear resigned to losing some more of their fishery.
I know that we only fish about 15% of the seafloor, and so I feel that there's plenty of natural refuge there anyway, so I'm not sure about it. We understand that the process is Australia-wide, so we know we have to live with that, so we're trying to work with government departments to ensure that there's the less impact on the industry as we can.